my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning into the LL3 podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date is Wednesday, December 23rd, 2020. Yeah, it looks like the judge overturned the Broward order from so-called Mayor Steve was it Gessler? Yeah, good. Or Geller, that's his name. Yeah, good. Don't comply. Nullify. We don't really need the courts to figure that one out. We can fight it ourselves, folks. And like I said, I talked about it on my show yesterday, have all the ammunition to back it up. So people in Broward County, anywhere in Florida, Broward County especially, know your rights. Don't complain. Don't be a nanny. Don't be one of those Orwellian saps or residential tourists, okay? That's how I look at it. Tired of your virus, your infectious nature contaminating space. It's pathetic. So that's how you gotta look at the whole scenario, and it's very intriguing, very exciting time to be alive as well. Yeah, I've been looking at. Looks like China has some issues with the floods, like in the southern part where the Three Gorges dam is. And I'll tell you this, folks got to really focus, because what can happen, based on the conflict with the differences with the U.S. and PRC, Communist China, their economy is going to be hurting big time, and they'll try to find other places, colonize and conquer for their own personal gain. There's nothing new happens with war in general, and there's nothing new. Even imperialism from them and the United States is totally unacceptable. So they call cause and effect. But the people will rise up there soon. They are rising up, even in that region as well. And always give them your blessings, because there's one crazy world we're living in right now. Turmoil, as usual. So all right, enough of me digressing here. Sorry about that. Do a couple commentary notes, and this one here is by Caitlin Johnstone, and she did a commentary on President Trump. Everything was wrong about Trump, by Caitlin Johnstone. She's in Australia right now. It says here, after a week of speculation and desperate hopes that Donald Trump might be preparing a pardoned NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden and or WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange before leaving office on January 20th, what the latest round of presidential pardons has delivered is about far that you can conceivably imagine. In an audacious pre-Christmas round of pardons, President Trump granted clemency on two people convicted in a special counsel's Russia inquiry, 4 Blackwater guards convicted in connection with the killing of Iraqi civilians, and 3 corrupt former Republican members of Congress, the New Times reported. I probably don't need to tell my regular readers this, but Trump pardon for Assange and Snowden is almost certainly not in the cards. Trump has done nothing but protect the imperial status quo the entire time he has been in office, and the pardon for either of those heroic government transparency advocates would be deviation from his established patterns unlike anything he's ever once demonstrated while in office. It's a good to pressure politicians to do the right thing, even when they probably won't, but it is a safe bet that they won't. And I did a show on that as well, which Tulsi Gabbard had a couple of resolutions to dismiss all charges against Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. And I know Matt Gertz co-sponsored one, and Thomas Hassan did the other, which are both Republicans. So it's a bigger picture. See, that's what I told you. You got to focus on that. And I'm just wondering if Ted Deutsch, congressman in my district, not my congressman to be exact, I don't know if he's supported or not. All I hear, last time he gave me a letter was all nothing more than rhetoric. I won't be surprised. Remember, he's a yes man, yes master. Not to us, but to the establishment. So I'll keep on going here. And there's a tweet on that. Trump's entire team has revealed that virtually everyone all across the U.S. political spectrum has been wrong about him. And it's a testament to the power of media echo chambers that for most part they remain just as wrong about him as they were 4 years ago. To this day, even after 4 years of evidence to the contrary, Trump supporters still believe their president has been ending the wars, draining the swamp, and fighting the deep state. They believe he's fighting the deep state even after he imprisoned Assange. They believe he's ending the wars even as he ramped up Cold War aggressions against Russia, killed tens of thousands of Venezuelans with starvation sanctions, vetoed attempts to save Yemen from U.S.-backed genocide, is working to foment civil war in Iran using starvation sanctions and CIA ops with the stated goal of effecting regime change, occupy Syrian oil fields with the goal of preventing Syria's reconstruction, greatly increase the number of troops in the Middle East and elsewhere, greatly increase, and the number of bombs dropped per day from the previous administration, killing records of numbers of civilians and reduced military accountability. For those airstrikes, they believe he's drained the swamp after packing his cabinet with established swamp monsters. To this day, even after 4 years of evidence to the contrary, liberals are still convinced that Trump is a servant of Russia who has spent his term advancing the interests of Vladimir Putin. They believe this even as he's been shredding treaties with Russia, bombing the Syrian government, and arming Ukraine, both of which Obama refused to do. Many sanctions and many other escalations directly against interests and safety of Russia. To this day, even after 4 years of evidence to the contrary, many of the left still continue their frequent claims that Trump is uniquely fascistic or Hitler-like president, despite his having far fewer deportations than Obama had. And despite the fact that he will certainly leave office on January 20th after losing an election. All sides pretend that Trump was a radical deviation from the norm, and so did Trump, when all he actually did throughout his entire time in office was protect the status quo just like his predecessors did. As writer and activist Sami Husseini recently put, Trump is an opposed thumb of the establishment. He looks like on the opposite side, but he just helps it grab more. So that's, of course, she says it only, and her response is, only if you can assume that Trump has ever had real interest in rocking the boat in any meaningful way. He doesn't. He does nothing. He's done nothing but protect the status quo through his entire term. After 4 years, everyone, left and right and center, has been proved wrong about Trump. He was neither a uniquely evil monster, he was indisputably not as even bad as Bush, nor a populist hero draining swamp and fighting for the common man against the deep state. In actuality, Trump's term has clearly established what he really was this entire time. He was a president, better than some, worse than others, but also deeply awful all around, since he voluntarily served as the face of the most evil and destructive force on earth, namely the United States government. He was the same kind of monster as his predecessors. Trump was a U.S. president of fairly average depravity, with a truly massive overlay of narrative heaped on top of him by partisan media on all sides. In reality, he was pretty much what you get if you took an average American Fox News watching boomer who yells at Obama on TV, made him rich, and then made him president. That's what Trump is and has been. Nothing more extraordinary than that. It is only the effectiveness of echo chambers and the human tendency to prioritize narrative over factual data which prevents more people from seeing this. And now he is leaving with his imaginary crimes. It's still held as real, and his actual crimes completely ignored. Humanity will not be able to create a healthy world until we find a way to transcend our unhealthy, delusional relationship with mental narrative, which so easily obscures our perspective of what really happened, what's really happening. No, it's a good viewpoint on that. That's why, and there's a lot of things she's right, because I did a little homework on some of his actions as well, and I'll be very fair. It's like, if you're going to be critical, have merit, don't be a parrot. And she laid down some facts, okay? And you can look it up yourselves. And so it's like, when it comes to imperialism, doesn't matter where it is, it's unacceptable. Like I said before during my rant. I don't like it at all. And people, if there's people, I remember the time when people rallied against the Iraq War. They go after Bush and Cheney, which I wasn't too pleased with. But the people but the ones that support it, I like them anyway. They don't say a damn thing. It's unacceptable. And they did the same thing when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton decided to go get involved in an attack in Libya. People didn't protest. They just gave me a dumb look. I hate doublespeak as well. And right there, Miss Johnstone, I have to agree with her in these areas. This is why I don't get too. I never get too crazy on government. I see the cloak and dagger adventure, and plus, of course, a lot of people, they still want to use the Russiagate propaganda and say he's the worst president ever. No, it's the same status quo. Okay, all these drama queens, they praise his predecessor, but that's okay. That's okay, right? Please, like bunch of dimwits out there. Her conformity 101. And that's how you gotta observe things. That's why when it comes to government, I've never been lovey-dovey. Always been vigilant, but rather vigilant. And this is why nullification is the key. We got 10th Amendment powers. Too many people going to the federal government or going to the big banks, IMF and World Bank and all these crappy global establishments. It's pathetic. So, and it's why, hey, let's keep on petitioning for, petition your servants on dismissing charges from Assange and Snowden. Tulsi Gabbard wrote it. I did a past episode on that, and check it out. And the links are all there too, so you just go there and petition, right? So, all right, we're gonna do one more here. Make this one a little bit brief. It's from the Rutherford Institute. What if Christ's child has been born in the American police state? It's what Mr. Whitehead has to say. It came out on the 21st, by the way. When the wrong song of angels is still, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flocks, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among the people, to make music in the heart. Howard Thurman. The Christmas story of a baby born in a manger is a familiar one. The Roman Empire police state in its own right has ordered that a census can be conducted. Joseph and his pregnant wife Mary traveled to the little town of Bethlehem so they can be counted. There being no room for a couple at any of the inns, they stayed in the stable, a barn where Mary gave birth to a baby boy Jesus, warned that the government planned to kill the baby. Jesus' family fled with him to Egypt until he was safe to return to their native land. Yet, what if Jesus had been born 2,000 years later? What if instead of being born into the Roman police state, Jesus has been born at this moment in time? What kind of reception would Jesus and his family be given? Would we recognize the Christ's child's humanity, let alone his divinity? We would treat him any differently than he was treated by the Roman Empire if his family were forced to flee violence in their native country and sought refuge and asylum within our borders. What sanctuary would we offer them? A singular number of churches across the country have asked those very questions in recent years. Their conclusions were depicted in unnerving accuracy by nativity scenes in which Jesus and his family are separated, segregated, and caged in individual chain-link pens topped by barbed wire fencing. Got a little strength there. The nativity scenes were pointed to attempt remind a modern world that a narrative about the birth of Jesus is one that speaks on multiple fronts to a world that has allowed life, teachings, and crucifixion of Jesus to be drowned out by partisan politics, secularism, materialism, and war, all driven by a manipulated shadow government called the deep state. The modern-day church has largely shied away from applying Jesus' teachings to modern problems such as war, poverty, immigration, etc. But thankfully, there have been individuals throughout history who asked themselves in the world, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus, the baby born in Bethlehem, who grew in itinerant preacher and revolutionary activist, not only died for challenging the police state of his day, namely the Roman Empire, but spent his adult life speaking the truth to power, challenging the status quo of his day and pushing back against the abuses of the Roman Empire due about the injustices of our modern age. Dietrich Bonhoeffer asked himself what Jesus would have done about the horrors perpetrated by Hitler and his assassins. The answer: Bonhoeffer was executed by Hitler for attempting to undermine the tyranny at the heart of Nazi Germany. Alexander Solzhenitsyn asked himself, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus would have done about the soul-destroying gulags and labor camps of the Soviet Union? The answer: Solzhenitsyn found his voice and used it to speak out about government oppression and brutality. Martin Luther King Jr. asked himself what Jesus would have done about America's warmongering. Answer: declaring my conscience leaves me no other choice. King risked widespread condemnation when he publicly opposed the Vietnam War on moral and economic grounds. Even now, despite the popularity of the phrase, what would Jesus do? In Christian circles, there remains a disconnect in the modern church between teachings of Christ and the suffering of what Jesus in Matthew 25 refers as the least of these. Yet, there is no theological gray area. Jesus was unequivocal about his views on many things, nor the least of which was charity, compassion, war, tyranny, and love. After all, Jesus was a reverend preacher, teacher, radical, and prophet. Was born into a police state, not unlike the growing menace of the American police state. When he grew up, he had powerful, profound things to say, things that would change how we view people, alter government policies, and change the world. Blessed are the merciful, blessed are the peacemakers, and love your enemies are just a few examples of his most profound and revolutionary teachings. When confronted by those in authority, Jesus did not shy away from speaking truth to power. Indeed, his teachings undermined the political and religious establishment of his day. It cost him his life. He was eventually crucified as a warning to others not to challenge the powers that be. Can you imagine what Jesus' life would have been like if, instead of being born into a Roman police state, if he had been born and raised in an American police state? Consider the following, if you will. Had Jesus been born in the area of the American police state, rather than traveling to Bethlehem for a census, Jesus' parents would have been mailed a 28-page American Community Survey, a mandatory government questionnaire documenting their habits, household inhabitants, work schedule, how many toilets are in your home, etc. The penalty for not responding to the invasive survey can go as high as $5,000. Instead of being born in a manger, Jesus might have been born at home, rather than wise men and shepherds bringing gifts. However, the baby's parents might have been forced to ward off visits from state social workers intent on prosecuting them for the home birth. One couple in Washington had all 3 children removed after social services objected to the 2 youngest being birthed in an unassisted home delivery. Had Jesus been born in a hospital, his blood and DNA would have been taken without his parents' knowledge or consent and entered into a government biobank, which most states require newborn screenings, a growing number of holding onto genetic material long-term for research analysis and purposes yet to be disclosed. Then again, had Jesus' parents been undocumented immigrants, and the newborn baby might have been shuffled to a profit-driven private prison for illegals, they would have been separated from each other, the children detained in makeshift cages, and the parents eventually turned into cheap forced laborers for corporations like Starbucks, Microsoft, Walmart, and Victoria's Secrets. There is quite a lot of money to be made from imprisoning immigrants, especially when taxpayers are footing the bill. From the time he was old enough to attend school, Jesus would have been drilled in lessons of compliance and obedience to government authorities. While learning about his own rights, he had been daring enough to speak out against injustice while still in school. he might have found himself tasered or beaten by a school resource officer, or at least suspended under a school zero tolerance program that punishes minor infractions and harshly as more serious offenses. Had Jesus disappear for a few hours, let alone days, as a 12-year-old, his parents would have been handcuffed, arrested, in jail for parental negligence. Parents across the country have been arrested for far less offenses, such as allowing their children to walk to the park accompanied and play in their front yard alone. Rather than disappearing from the history books from his early teenage years to adulthood, Jesus' movements and personal data, including his biometrics, would have been documented, tracked, monitored, and followed by government agencies and corporations such as Google and Microsoft. Incredibly, 95% of school districts share their student records with outside companies that are contracted to manage data, which they use to market products to us. From the moment Jesus made contact with an extremist such as John the Baptist, he would have been flagged for surveillance because of his accusations, a prominent activist, peaceful or otherwise. Since 9/11, the FBI actively carried out surveillance and intelligence gathering operations on a broad range of activist groups, from animal rights groups to poverty relief, anti-war groups, and other such extremist organizations. Jesus' anti-government views would certainly have resulted him being labeled a domestic extremist. Law enforcement agencies are being trained to recognize signs of anti-government extremism during interactions with potential extremists who share a belief in the approaching collapse of government and the economy. While traveling from community to community, Jesus might have been reported to government officials as suspicious under the Homeland Security See Something, Say Something programs. Many states, including New York, are providing individuals with phone apps that allow them to take photos of suspicious activities and report them to their state intelligence center, where they are reviewed and forwarded to law enforcement agencies. Rather than being permitted to live as an itinerant preacher, Jesus might have found himself threatened with arrest for daring to live off the grid or sleeping outside. In fact, the number of cities that have resorted to criminalizing homelessness by enacting bans on camping, sleeping in vehicles, loitering, and begging in public has doubled. Viewed by the government as a dissident and a potential threat to its power, Jesus might have had government spies planted among his followers to monitor his activities, report on his movements, and entrapped him breaking the law. The Judases today, called informants, often received hefty paychecks from the government for their treachery. Had Jesus used the internet to spread his radical message of peace and love, he might have found his blog infiltrated by government spies, attempt to undermine his integrity, discredit him, or plant incriminating information online about him. At the very least, he would have had his website hacked and his email monitored. Had Jesus attempted to feed large crowds of people, he would have been threatened with arrest for violating various ordinances prohibiting the distribution of food without a permit. Florida officials arrested a 90-year-old man for feeding the homeless on a public beach. I forgot the guy's name. But yeah, he recently passed away. Love thy neighbor. What's his name? Arnold Abbott? Yeah, it was Arnold Abbott. Maybe Arnold Abbott. So I'll continue on here. Let's just see. Had Jesus spoken publicly about his 40 days in the desert in his conversations with the devil, he might have been labeled mentally ill and detained in a psych ward against his will for a mandatory involuntary psychiatric hold with no access to family or friends. One Virginia man was arrested, strip searched, handcuffed to a table, diagnosed having mental health issues, and locked up for 5 days in a mental health facility against his will, apparently because he slurred speech and unsteady gait. Without a doubt, had Jesus attempted to overturn tables in the Jewish temple and rage against materialism of religious institutions, he would have been charged with a hate crime. Currently, 45 states and the federal government have hate crime laws on the books. Totally illegal, by the way. Okay, so totally irrelevant, unacceptable. And you folks out there, if you see, any laws are considered repugnant to our Constitution, whether it's federal or state, you can say not guilty. Jury nullification does work. Don't hesitate to use it if necessary. Had anyone reported Jesus to the police as being potentially dangerous, he might have found himself confronted and killed by police officers of whom any perceived act for noncompliance, a twitch, a question, a frown, can result them in shooting first, asking questions later. Rather than having armed guards capture Jesus in a public place, government officials would have ordered that a SWAT team carry out a raid on Jesus and his followers, complete with the flashbang grenades and military equipment. There are upwards of 80,000 such SWAT team raids carried out every year, many on unsuspecting Americans who have no defense against such government invaders. Even with such raids are done in error. Instead of being detained by Roman guards, Jesus might have been made to disappear into a secret government detention center where he would have been interrogated, tortured, and subjected to all manner of abuses. Chicago police have disappeared more than 7,000 people into a secret, off-the-book interrogation warehouse at Harmon Square. I did a show on that too. That's I think it's maybe about 5 years ago. I did a show on that. So, charged with treason and labeled domestic terrorist, Jesus might have been sentenced to a life term in a private prison where he would have been forced to provide slave labor for corporations or put to death by way of electric chair or lethal mixture of drugs. Indeed, as I show in my book, Battlefield America, The War in a Police State, given the nature of the government then and now, it's painfully evident that whether Jesus had been born in our modern age or his own, he would still have died at the hands of the police state. Thus, as we draw near to Christmas with the celebrations and gift giving, we will do well to remember that what happened on the starry night in Bethlehem is only part of the story. That baby in the manger grew up to be a man who did not turn away from evil, but instead spoke out against it. And we must not do no less. And he's absolutely correct. And it's interesting about it. It doesn't matter what your creed is and so forth. It's a very interesting story. Remember, rebels back then, mavericks, been around for many millenniums. Including police states. Yes, government in Latin is control of the mind. And even George Washington, and even the Founding Fathers warned us about this particular institution. When you get together, be with your family, friends, loved ones you cherish, talk about these things. It is essential. You see all these whack job quacks out there trying to do their own little pathetic thing, thinking we need a revolution, which is not revolutionary enough. Question everything. Observe responsibly. And stand up for what's right. It's okay to say no to the propaganda matrix. And this is why I'm always one of those individuals that have that in my nature. And not afraid to share it to everyone else. Or on my show, out in the streets, etc. All right, folks. That will be it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share this throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or something that's interesting you want to check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondence to Quorum. Furthermore, I'll leave these articles or footnotes on my Spreaker page. If you're going to contact me, hit me at LokiLuck3@gmail.com or LokiLuckNumber03@protonmail.com. If you want to do a donation, you can hit me at paypal.me/LokiLuckNumber3 and support Catlin Johnstone and the Rutherford Institute as well, if you can, by sharing this stuff and send them some contributions. That would be greatly appreciated. Because remember, we're all in this together, one way or the other. All right? Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.